If you ever found out that for 7 years you've been raising a child that isn't really yours, would you leave? I didn't leave. I stayed. I continued making breakfast, tying his shoelaces, laughing at his stupid jokes, because I loved him anyway. With such fierce intensity, it hurt. I loved him madly. But you know what's strangest? Nobody ever called me strong. No one ever patted me on the shoulder. Everyone thinks I'm a weakling, a pathetic loser. Maybe they're right, but I'm going to tell you everything, from the very beginning. And if by the end you say that you would have acted differently, fine. Let it be. Just listen. We met at a friend's birthday party. There was a crowd, music blasting, plastic cups everywhere. Some people sang, some drank, some acted like complete idiots. And then there was her, just standing by the wall, drinking water. No flirting, no attempts to impress. Real, unmasked. She grabbed my attention, not in a movie like, oh, butterflies in my stomach way, but rather as if I'd finally found home, even though I had never seen her before. We talked all evening, about music, about work, about how annoying it is when people yell in movie theaters. And when I walked her to the taxi stand, I already knew I wanted to see her again, and again, and again. A few days later, we were texting nonstop. 3 months in, we were living together. After a year, wedding day. And I was happy. True, warm, normal happiness. Then Matt was born. I remember holding him at the hospital. He was all covered in that fluid with the same eyes, the same nose as her. I looked at him and just burst into tears. I never knew I was capable of loving someone so fiercely. We were an ordinary family. Work, a home, weekends filled with cartoons. We argued sometimes. We laughed like fools at others. But overall, no drama, no trash, just good. I thought to myself, this is it. This is what everything was for. I built this with my own 2 hands. But apparently I got my hopes up too soon. I started feeling symptoms. My kidneys were failing. At first I was just tired. Then swelling set in, and my blood pressure soared like that of an old man's. The doctor said a transplant might be necessary. It didn't sound too scary, but he advised that we find out in advance who might be a donor. And he suggested, check your relatives. Maybe someone in your family could be a match. Without hesitation, I thought, Matt, our little guy, only 7 years old? Who else if not him? My wife and I agreed without a second thought. He was our son. I didn't even question it. A few days later, the test results came in. The doctor called me in alone, which immediately felt off. Usually, if everything's fine, you just get a piece of paper and congratulations. But this time, I was called in for a meeting. Compatibility is 0. This rarely happens. Are you absolutely sure this is your child? He said calmly. I was hit like a ton of bricks. At first, I couldn't grasp what was happening. I thought it must be a mistake, a system error. My mind raced with these thoughts, but the doctor didn't interrupt. He just waited. I went home and told her. She broke down crying. And I realized this wasn't a joke anymore. At first, I couldn't believe it. I thought, there must be some error. But that night, sleep wouldn't come. My mind was spinning. The next day, I went to a private clinic and took the test myself. I couldn't bring myself to believe it. For 2 excruciating weeks, 2 of the longest weeks of my life, I barely ate. I sat on the couch, staring blankly into space. And when I finally opened the envelope, I realized nothing that came before mattered anymore. There was no arguing with the truth. Matt isn't mine. I showed her the results. She collapsed onto the floor, unable even to stand. She cried uncontrollably, in a way that just didn't seem human. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. We didn't speak for at least 5 minutes. She kept repeating, it was one time, just one time. I don't know how it happened. She admitted it was with her ex. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean to. That was it. I stood there, silent. Because by that moment, I already understood. I couldn't just leave. Yes, I was in shock. But I realized then that Matt was still my son. Biology doesn't decide. At that moment, something inside me broke. Not physically leaving her, but inside I felt like everything was falling apart. I became nothing but a shell. No longer a man, no longer a husband, no longer a father, just a ghost going through the motions. She tried to explain, but her words meant nothing anymore. She thought I wouldn't leave, I would stay. But I couldn't look at her. I saw her, but it was like she was a stranger. And Matt, he still called me Dad. I didn't know what to do. What remained wasn't love. It was emptiness. I silently walked into the kitchen and started smashing everything in my path. The microwave, the coffee maker, everything. I wrecked the entire kitchen. She just stood there watching me, sobbing. I didn't touch her, not even once. I wasn't that kind of man, but I broke everything else. She was on the floor and I just kept going, almost like it was automatic. That was when I realized I could never forgive her. And yet, I couldn't just leave her either. I couldn't abandon Matt. I didn't shout. We didn't have a screaming match. Everything just fell apart. We lived like strangers under the same roof. No conversations, no intimacy, no joy. Everything was empty. Every morning I'd take Matt to daycare, pouring him milk over cereal, tying his shoelaces, just to avoid looking her in the eyes. She would simply stand there in silence. In the evenings, she tried to do something, cooking dinner, asking me about my day, but it all felt hollow. I could see she was trying with all her might to bring back something real, but I had already changed. I couldn't get back what I had lost. I began to drink, not to the point of getting wasted out of control, but I poured myself a little every day, just to stop thinking thinking? To numb the pain, I drowned myself slowly, as if quenching an unending thirst. Maybe she hoped that I'd change my mind, but I couldn't. I couldn't, because that single moment when she said, "It was just one time," haunted me relentlessly. She carried on with her life as if nothing had happened. Matt grew older. He kept calling me Dad, and every time he did, something inside me died a little more. I even imagined packing up my things and leaving. In the mornings, I'd tell myself it was over, but by the evenings, watching Matt drawing in the kitchen and calling me Dad, I couldn't bring myself to go, so I kept living in that house, in emptiness, like a shadow. They say, if someone has betrayed you once, they'll do it again. That thought just wouldn't leave my mind. Time passed. Matt grew up. He increasingly started to resemble me, in his laughter, in the way he spoke, but there was always this nagging feeling in his eyes, as if something was off, a deep worry, something I can't quite explain. Even when he said Dad, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't deserve it. Then one evening, she approached me while I was sitting with a bottle of whiskey and said, "I'm pregnant." That moment, everything inside me shattered. 100 thoughts crashed in my head, and then those two words, "I'm pregnant." It felt like a punch right in the face. I froze. I just stared at her, feeling everything in my gut turn upside down, and I thought, that's it, the final proof. She's decided to play her game again. My first thought was, Matt isn't mine, and who knows, maybe this new baby isn't mine either. Everything suddenly felt so numb and repulsive that I couldn't even find words. I couldn't believe it. You'd think that after such betrayal you could eventually forgive, but no. She had invaded my life once more, and now I had to wonder, whose child was this? I couldn't go on like this. No matter how much I wanted to say that everything would be okay, I just couldn't. She stared at me as I struggled for words. I might have told her, then just get out, but I was scared. She was there. Matt was there, and I just didn't know how to move forward. I said nothing. I just drank more, and it all started to blur together. Words weren't even necessary anymore. Deep down, I already knew. I would never be able to forget what she'd done. That was when I realized I couldn't leave things as they were. I began watching her, monitoring her phone, listening to how she talked to someone, though I couldn't even tell who. Every word she uttered spun around in my head, every detail analyzed. You can't help but obsess when you've been betrayed. You just can't forget. And yet something was off. She was always by my side. That "I'm pregnant" revelation, which hit me like a sledgehammer, wouldn't let me rest. I couldn't just believe that things would go back to the way they were. She had taken that step again. I started looking for clues, even the faintest traces. Photos on social media, messages on her phone. I wasn't just suspicious. I was convinced. There was someone else. One night, while she was asleep, I sat at the computer and noticed her phone light up with a message. I immediately jumped up. I looked at the screen. There was a conversation with him. Her ex. "Are you thinking about me?" That phrase, echoing in my head, was unbearable. Why was she texting him? Why not me? I was here with her, with our boy, living in the nightmare that had become our home, while she continued to talk to her ex. I didn't hesitate. I took a screenshot and sent it to my phone. That was it. I knew something was wrong. There was no point in pretending everything was normal any longer. Every day, I watched her messages, tracked where she went, whom she met. My mind wouldn't rest. The ex, his name, his face, everything drove me insane. I imagined tearing him apart, breaking every bone in his body for what he'd done. I knew where he worked, where he traveled. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. I was ready to confront him. One day, as usual, I was home alone, working, scrolling through my phone trying to dismiss the thought of how things should have been. And then, a knock on the door. I opened it to find him standing there, that very man. Her ex, the real biological father of Matt. He was calm, almost too calm, with a bottle of whiskey in hand. It wasn't as if he was afraid of me. On the contrary, he exuded confidence. It was as if he had been invited, as if he had been preparing for this moment. "We need to talk," he said. I barely managed to stop myself from lashing out. I looked him square in the eye, but gave nothing away. All I felt was a burning desire to make his life hell. "Who the hell do you think you are to tell me what to do?" I spat. He just smiled, completely unruffled, as if he'd seen me 1,000 times before. "She hasn't told you everything, has she?" I wanted to scream, to pounce on him. But before I could, he said one phrase that flipped everything upside down. "I'm not here to beg for forgiveness. I'm here to tell you the truth, and you need to know it before the second baby is born." He set the bottle down on the table and began to speak. Sitting down, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and looked at me as if nothing was wrong. I couldn't move or breathe. All I wanted was to hear the truth, and if it made even a little sense, maybe I could listen. But this man wasn't just the one who had shattered my world. He was the one who continued to try to manipulate me. He poured himself another drink and slowly swirled the glass, never taking his eyes off me. "Listen, you haven't been told everything," he said calmly, as if indifferent to what was unfolding. With every word, I felt a burning pain inside. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore what was happening. "Do you think I don't know? Do you think she didn't break me with those 'I'm sorry, it was just one time' excuses?" My chest tightened with anger that wasn't born of fear, but but pure rage. He leaned forward so that I could even catch a whiff of his breath before continuing steadily. And what if I told you that she wrote to me? After the wedding, no less. My mind barely had time to react. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't accept that things might be even worse than I'd imagined. Bullshit, I managed to choke out. Feel free to check. I saved everything, he replied, pulling out his phone. I couldn't take my eyes off him. He did it. He showed me the conversation that left no doubt. On the screen were her messages, her name, her pictures, the same text that had driven me to the brink. Are you thinking about me? Everything was there. Why was she writing to him? Why had it all happened? What do you want? I demanded, barely holding back my emotions. I was about to explode, yet the words lodged in my throat. He kept his gaze calm, and I didn't know what to do with this damning knowledge. Then, as if things couldn't get any worse, he added, You're too weak to handle the truth, but your elder son, Matt, he's actually mine. As for the second one, he's definitely not mine. The last time she slept with me was a very, very long time ago. Most likely that one is yours. But if I were you, I'd get a DNA test. At that moment, it all hit me. I needed to hear this. It was the final blow. And in my mind, one thought reverberated relentlessly. If someone betrays you once, they're bound to do it again. My wife now claims that the second child is mine. But damn, I don't know. How can I trust her after everything she's done? It seems I've fallen right into her trap. She kept saying how much she loved me, that things would be different this time, that everything would change. But I began to doubt again. What if it was just another lie? What if she was deceiving me all over again? Every day I felt more and more like an idiot. And the fact that she was still standing there, trying to convince me that things would be okay, it was killing me. I couldn't figure out how to stop it. I was so tangled up that I no longer knew who was right, who was to blame, or which one of us was even normal. I started asking myself questions that were slowly destroying me. If the second child isn't mine, if she's deceived me again, what am I supposed to do? I couldn't accept that her words meant nothing once more. In the end, I couldn't remain in ignorance. I had to find out the truth. I had to know who the real father of this child was. Did my wife deceive me again? Is the second child mine, or is there someone else involved? You'll find out the answers in part 2 of this story coming very soon. If you're curious about what happens next, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the continuation. It means the world to me. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you found out that the child you love isn't really yours? How would you deal with such betrayal? Thank you for sticking with me. You're my support on this insane journey.